Hello Steelers, and welcome to this slightly different video to what I normally do. This is a review of this new book. This is WW1 Trench Systems, Wargames, Terrain and Buildings. Written by Douglas Hardy, published by Pen and Sword. It's currently, at the moment, there's on release. It's only just been released in 2021. It's $14.99 in the UK, or in the US $29.95. So there's your prices. It is a book about making First World War scenery for Wargames tables. So it sparked my interest because obviously I've an interest in the First World War and an interest in First World War wargaming, as you'll see some of my videos on the channel as well. So I thought I'd pick this up on release, and I thought, there's a couple of people asked me on Twitter if I'd do a review of it, so this is the review. So there's the price. It's a softback book. And it's about, I think it's about 134 pages thereabouts, full colour, as you can see here. What I'll do is I'll take you through each of the different sections and we can talk about them, what you'd expect to find out of it. There's a lot of pictures in it, as I mentioned, full colour pictures. It took me probably about two hours to read through from beginning to end. So it kind of tells you really how big the book is itself. It's not an onerous task to get read, and it's got some quite good ideas inside of it. So what I'll do is we'll get some close-ups of the book, and I shall show you some of the sections inside. Okay, well, first of all, I'm not sure who Douglas Hardy actually is, but from the back of the book it says that he's a keen wargamer and also a member of the Western Front Association. So there's two ticks for me as far as I'm concerned, and he's visited battlefields in France and Belgium as well quite a lot. So it's obviously somebody who has a background interest in the First World War, which from my point of view is quite a relief, because some of the First World War trenches I've seen in wargaming tables are far from their what they're supposed to look like. Anyway, that's a minor bugbear on my part, but we start off really with an introduction to the book, and also quite a nice introduction into trench warfare as well. And I was very happy to see that a lot of the new ideas about the First World War, I say new since the 70s onwards, ideas about the First World War are full of in here. He also mentions quite a few books as well in this stuff. So people like Martin Middlebrook is mentioned, you know, famous historian of the First World War. So again, it's really nice to see this kind of stuff, and some of the descriptions of the British and German and French trenches in here do match up to reality. So that is good. A good introduction to the period. A little thin, but you know, how much can you fit into a book really when you're trying to deal with other things as well. And then also he goes on to talk about in wargaming the First World War as well, or the Great War as you call it here, and he's mentioned a few of the sets, the rule sets that you can get. So he does mention Through the Mud and the Blood by the Two Fat Lardies, the Flames of War, their First World War sets, also Warhammer Historical, which I've never played, and other few others, Bloody Picnic, Over the Top for Command Decision, Great War Spearhead. There's a couple missed in from there, things like Pizza Pigs, Square Bashing, and a couple others here and there. But you know, it's not about rules, it's about making the terrain itself. But it's good to see quite a few of these mentioned. And again, he just goes on really just to talk about trenches and how they're used. Chapter 2 is a nice introduction to the materials that you would generally use. So he's basically gone through quite a lot of the different bits and pieces here. So matchsticks, wooden stirrers, cocktail sticks, string, adhesive, all kinds of stuff, and again all photographs. So you can basically go around your DIY shop and pick this stuff up if you don't have it. A lot of this, if you're already a wargamer or you make your own terrain, you probably have a lot of this anyway, but it's always good to be reminded of it. What I did like was the corrugated iron or wriggly tin. He calls it wrinkly tin. I've always called it wriggly tin. The two are interchangeable really, but the fact that he mentions this and you can get it from model railway suppliers is a good idea as well. But again, as I say, a lot of this stuff is relatively basic, but it is good just to have a checklist of the kinds of things that you're going to need when you're making any kind of wargaming terrain. And then we move into a little bit where he talks a little bit about whether to buy actual commercial trenches or whether to scratch build them, and the pros and cons of that. And there's a rather large section. Chapter 4 is on commercially made terrain. So basically it goes through some of the main people that are producing this stuff, like Ironclad and early war miniatures, and a few others here and there as well, just people that do trenches. And this is quite a long section, and he talks in some depth and in some detail, and quite nicely as well, about how to basically tart these things up and make them a bit more useful. So just adding a few extra bits will make them look a lot better. I mean, the early war miniature stuff is great anyway. I've got a couple of their trenches. I really like it. I've not done anything to mine, but what you can do is, you know, just mess about with them and just make them a little bit more individual to you, if that's the kind of thing you're after. So he talks here again about making sandbags to put on for these kind of things, the Ironclad and Amira trenches, which are slightly basic when you buy them, but they do have some nice bits and pieces, like, you know, these pillboxes and things that you can build into their systems as well. That's something I'm thinking about scratch building myself, but having seen these, I might actually buy them and see if I can fit them into my trench systems, because 28mm pillboxes will work quite easily as well for 15mm, which is what I use. We're talking about the vac-formed Amira stuff, which again I knew about, but I've never used. And looking at some of these pictures, there's probably quite a lot of work you probably have to put in on these things to make them look reasonable if you wanted to take it to that next level. And this is what a large part of this particular section is about basically just, as I say, adding those extra bits and pieces. And he goes through all the steps really of just adding trench planking and A-frames and sandbagging and all that kind of stuff in there. This is a I really like this section actually. It was really useful, just to give you an idea really of what you can do with these things, and also just how to paint them as well with textured paint and get them looking pretty good and trench-like. So there's quite a lot in that. As I say, this is probably the most detailed of the sections. And then we move on to the scratch building, and slightly disappointed by the scratch building because there's not a great amount of detail in this. I think there's enough to get you going, but I suppose you don't really need to know a great deal. It's basically what the mills are and how to cut it out. And this is what he's done. You know, what more can I say really? He's basically just showing you how to get the large styrofoam blocks, how to cut them so the trenches have got a slope on them, how to make your shell craters using chisels and things. But I suppose a lot of this stuff was covered in the previous section, in the previous chapter anyway, so he's just using the same kind of techniques but just slightly differently. And again, you know, one of the good things he does mention is, you know, no man's land wouldn't be so full of shell craters as around the trenches, because there's no point firing artillery into the centre of nowhere. That was quite a nice little thing I picked up on when he's talking about doing your no man's land. But the trenches that he's created and scratch built from these photos, I mean, they're absolutely fantastic. They really are. They really look the part as far as I'm concerned. I'd love to see these in real life. You can see here some photos of them in the book itself, and they're worth just poring over just to see some of the detail that's been put in, like the overhead frames and things on the German trenches, all the planking. And this stuff obviously takes a long time, and it has kind of inspired me, and I've been thinking about making a trench system, you know, a smallish 4x4 square foot square trench system using all the materials and ideas that are in this book. I say this section is largely lots of photographs, so there's lots of eye candy in there for you, which is why it's a little light on the detail itself. But you know, to look at these pictures, they are lovely. They're really nice. Let's just skip forward a little bit, and they do look fantastic when they're all put together and laid out and you get close down photos. Another section is the projects, which he's talking here really about just adding pillboxes and ruined buildings and things like that you can put in. And one thing he does stress throughout the book is really just that these things should be modular, so you can just change them around on the rest of your trench board, so they all fit together. Shattered woods, I mean, very typical of the First World War is damaged woods. I've done things like this very similarly, just getting garden twigs, sticking them into plastered bases. I did this for square bashing years ago. The problem is with this is that they do snap very easily, and I found that to my cost. He covers other bits and pieces such as artillery positions, although, you know, as he says in here as well, you know, these wouldn't really be found so close to the front, but it could be a position that's overrun, either in the 1918 attacks. And then finally, the last chapter is researching the First World War trenches today, and he talks about some of the different sites that you can visit in France and Belgium. So we've got here the Trench of Death up in Belgium, which is in Dixmude, concreted trenches. I've never actually been to these, but this is the reconstruction of the trenches at the time. They've also got the Memorial Museum of Passchendaele as well, very clean looking trenches there, another reconstruction. I don't think I've visited these either. I've seen lots of different kinds of trenches. I can never remember which ones I've been to and which I haven't. But they've got examples of both British and German ones. And these, again, these photographs, although they are of reconstructions, they're good just for your modelling purposes as much as anything else, without having to visit the places as well. Full colour, again, photos. He's also got Hooge Crater as well, which is out in Ypres. The ones up at Hill 60, Sanctuary Wood. These ones here as well. This is some of the first trenches I visited when I first went to Belgium about 20 odd years ago, and these have been reconstructed by the owner of the museum. They are apparently on the original lines, but I think some of the shell craters every so often get dug out with a shovel. And just skip through these, we've got to the Beyenwald as well, which is up near Ypres on Mont Kemmel, a reconstruction of German trenches. These ones don't have a parapet or a parados, which is interesting, but they do have the wattling that the German trenches did have at the time. And you can see the floor as well. So again, reconstructions, but you know, based on original materials. And then finally the ones at Ocean Villas, or Oceanville, which are the first trenches that I ever excavated or helped to excavate back in 2003. So it's lovely to see these in the book. And you can see here this is British communication trench leading up towards Beaumont-Hamel in France itself. Unfortunately, he doesn't mention the trenches at Thiepval, which I've also been involved with, which are reconstructions on the original trench lines as well, and using all material from the time. Just to give you an idea, whether he's aware of them or not, I don't know, but I'll be surprised if he's not, and I'm very surprised not to see them in here, just a few snaps. But that kind of ends it, really. That ends the book, and as I say, it's quite good. As a start-off book for this kind of thing, if you're just wanting to start making some trenches or just think about it, there's quite a lot of information in there. Those photographs do show you some good details, and just following his instructions, I think you will get some nice trenches made. Well, there's not a great deal more I can say about it, really. It's an interesting book. If you can find it, then I would suggest buying it if you're interested in First World War wargaming. You know, it's a modern take on the First World War, which is never a bad thing, and written by somebody who, you know, has an interest and a knowledge of the First World War, and that shines through as well. Good little introduction to it. So yes, I would certainly recommend this if you are just starting off. Well, thanks for watching that video. If you've enjoyed it, please do subscribe to the channel and give me a like and give me a comment.